But where's the special sauce to deal with this menacing thing that, let's face it, is in it's 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 pervasive enough to where I feel comfortable to say that to some degree or another there is some element of drama in the workplace, and I hate
Mhm.
it. I absolutely hate it, and I think that that is probably one of the number one reasons why people leave organizations.
Strategy is standard, but leading people, that's where the magic happens. In every organization, there comes a moment, a shift, a stretch, a choice. How do you help your people thrive? Give them the voice, the tools, and the leadership they deserve.
I'm Rhonda.
And I'm Kevin.
Welcome to the Wolfpack Rise and Howl podcast, where we talk about what it takes to lead, coach, and transform from the inside out.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon. Yeah, so we are on episode 6 now, right?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. So I wanted to go a little bit off of the regular routine. I know we usually have a preset topic every week, but I think that what I want to talk about today is very timely and based on current events. I have been very disheartened at the number of stories that I've been seeing in the past week about people really kind of losing it over what's been going on in the news. And honestly, in general, it's just been kind of a rough year for a lot of people for different reasons. And it made me kind of think about how this plays out in the workplace, because even recently I'm seeing things about people behaving inappropriately in the workplace. um, on either side, whether it's the employee or the employer. Um, I certainly don't think people should get fired over their opinions about things. You don't have to like everybody's opinion, but unless they're breaking company policy or they're speaking out on behalf of the company in an inappropriate way, I don't think that people should be losing their jobs because of their opinions about things that are going on politically, religious wise, whatever the case may be. So I kind of wanted to bring that up because another matter that has weighed on me, not recently, but it's just been a thing that I think we've all been aware of. And I saw someone post about it a few times, workplace bullying. And so, this just kind of folds in. Like, people can be jerks at work. Bullies don't always come in a fifth grade size kid on a schoolyard. There are adults in workplaces that are bullies as well. And there are people who behave very inappropriately in the workplace, and they don't know how to leave their drama at home. So I just wanted to lead in with that and just kind of ask how are you feeling about what you've been seeing going on, and from your HR lens, how can a company prepare itself for the onslaught of just crap that's coming down the pipe, and whether it's because of current affairs or even just on a normal regular basis, drama in the workplace. That was the topic that I was thinking about this week. It's like, how do we deal with all this drama and trauma in the workplace?
Yeah, Rhonda. Let me just tell you this. Uh, Personally, it's very disheartening
It
um,
is, yeah.
to witness everything that's going on in our society today. I mean, I'm just going to put it out there, and I know for a lot of people, as you very well know, I retired earlier this year from a large organization. And I can only imagine. I think about and reflect on what the environment might feel like today, since I left in the first quarter, at the end of the first quarter of this year. So much has happened, and I know that people are just probably really struggling in the workplace in terms of what they see in the evenings on the news, what they read, what comes over the feed on their computers, and even while they're at work. And so it's stuff that you can't just ignore and you know kick under the rug, or so to speak. So I know it has an effect, and it's probably somewhat of an adverse effect on how people are feeling in the workplace. And so, how do you deal with that? Well, you know, most organizations rely on policies and procedures that they have in place to help guide behavior in the workplace. Um, most best practice organizations have in place a code of conduct
Mm-hmm.
policy that guides and forms, if you will, again, the staff's behavior in the workplace. I mean, there's certain things that you're expected to conduct yourself by to help create a positive and productive workplace. And so, but you can't maintain a positive and productive workplace you know, if people aren't playing by the rules with regards to things that are considered taboo and controversial, things that might initiate conflict in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I know a lot of organizations, and before I retired, the organization that I was with was grappling with some things that were taking shape, form in terms of uh, diversity and that kind of thing. And um, it's just you just set the policy and you have conversation around it. You communicate it repeatedly, and you just expect that employees will understand and adhere to those policies and those procedures. Now,
Yeah.
having said all of that,
Mm-hmm.
in the real world, guess what happens? That just doesn't manage it. People talk. There's coffee, cooler, water cooler talk or whatever, and you know, so it's just it's not an easy thing to manage and deal with or whatever, but you have to have somewhat of a template in place to help guide and direct behavior, if you will, and you sort of put it in that box, you put it in that space that, hey, our expectation is that you are going to behave in a certain manner, and that also brings into how you communicate and what you communicate. There are some things that are just considered taboo that just don't mix well in the workplace, and like politics, for an example, is one of those things.
Yeah, and I guess for me, I was just hoping to just kind of really dig into, how can I mean, there's policies and procedures and all the HR stuff. I mean, all that's a given. We know that those things are in place, especially if you're just like at a pretty normal, organization. We would expect those things to be in place. But despite all of that, like you said, people are going to do what they're going to do, and they're going to, they're going to they're just going to be however they're going to be. But beyond that, how can we help people, because policies aren't going to just do it by themselves. I mean, there's got to be a human element in there in terms of helping people navigate these times and helping them to deal with one another.
Hmm.
We've so far, since we've just
Yeah.
started this podcast, we've talked about onboarding, we've talked about culture, we've talked about team coaching, we've talked about training, we've talked about conflict resolution. But where's the special sauce to deal with this menacing thing that, let's face it, is in it's pervasive enough to where I feel comfortable to say that to some degree or another, there is some element of drama in the workplace. And I hate it. I absolutely hate it. And I think that that is probably one of the number one reasons why people leave organizations.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so, and you and I have discussed this in the past, but we're talking about it this morning in a more formal manner through our podcast. And so you referenced the secret sauce. Okay, so I
Mm-hmm.
think the secret sauce lies in number one, how staff members should govern themselves in this period that we're in, with all that's going on and the stuff that's in the news. So in the workplace, perhaps there's a certain way or manner that you conduct yourself to stay out of the drama. Okay, so each employee can govern themselves by number one, don't entertain it, don't get in the drama. If there's certain comments, conversation that's taking place around the water cooler or the coffee room or whatever, you hear it, kind of distance yourself from it, remain neutral. You know, don't take sides. If someone says, "Hey, what do you think about you know what the latest that's happened?" XYZ that that's that was on the news last evening. What's your thoughts about that? And if it's
Right.
something that's rather controversial and people could stand very strongly on one side or the other or whatever, don't engage in it. Politely invite yourself out of that conversation, if you will, because a lot of it too is, you know, it's sort of on the border of gossip, if you will. And most organizations don't, condone gossip, if you will. That's one of the things that you would find in a code of conduct
Mm-hmm.
policy. Well, don't
So,
participate in
right.
spreading rumors, if you will. So,
And
yeah.
that and I'm pretty familiar with that. I guess I'm wanting to dig a little bit deeper because I think that I'm challenging you because I feel like, if that worked, then this wouldn't continue to be a problem. And people can write all the policies and have codes of conduct and have employee manuals and da 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 to the end of time. But how can we actually, and maybe I'm being naive, maybe this is just unrealistic for me to expect that there could be something more meaningful and deeper that could happen to get people to think differently about it. Do organizations, how do you straddle the line between sticking to your policies and playing it safe and taking the HR route and doing the things that you normally know that you're supposed to do or not do, versus acknowledging the elephant in the room, that there is tension. And like you had mentioned in a earlier conversation, people are often just walking around on eggshells and have been for a while, and that's just not good. And that has the potential, in my opinion, to create toxic work environments. And so it's like, I know that as adults and as working professionals, we all understand that there are things that we can't do or shouldn't do in the workplace. That's pretty common sense. I would think it's common sense. Or let me just say, I know common sense is a flower that doesn't grow in everybody's garden. Okay, I get that. But that being said, I wonder if there's ever an appropriate time in some kind of strange way to at least address the fact that it's happening without engaging in it or encouraging it or making it fester more, but to at least acknowledge, you know, hey, we know that things are tense right now. Things are tough out there. We know that some of you are walking around on eggshells. We know these are difficult times. There's a lot going on in the world. We're all human beings. How could you not be affected by things that are going on. We as, XYZ company, although we have our policies and whatnot, and I would assume that, especially in HR, they might remind people that they have employee assistance programs if they need to go talk to someone. But that's helpful for the individual. But I mean, how do you get your teams? How do you get departments? How do you get directors, leaders, managers to kind of be present and at least acknowledge it, and so that people aren't, they're not having their intelligence insulted, like, oh, are we going to just sit here and not talk about all the tension that's been in the room for the past 2 years or whatever? We're just going to act like it's not happening. Or we're going to act like Bob didn't just, throw shade at Mary over there, is there ever an appropriate way to just be present in a different way without crossing
Absolutely.
too many
Yeah.
HR lines, where you can at
Oh, yeah.
least speak openly about it?
Yeah. Absolutely, Rhonda, and point well taken. That you just can't hide behind a policy, because that's not going to that's not bulletproof. And on that note, by the way, you're never, as long as people communicate with each other, as long as there's the type of things that are going on in our society today, they're unavoidable. People are going to discuss those things. People are going to feel a certain way. And by the way, those individuals who suppress it or whatever, sometimes it comes out in adverse ways, stress. It induces stress or whatever. So you don't necessarily want to ignore, the symptoms, if you will. And so to that, I would say that a best practice for a leader to take is to, try to manage that with the group, with the team or whatever. In staff meetings, ask people, how are you doing? How are you feeling? I know there's a lot going on right now. And the leader might even, see it. The leader might see that certain behaviors are taking place on the team. They notice that people aren't their usual selves, if you will, and they can induce that perhaps it's a result of things that are taking place in society right now. It could be affecting people. There could be economically, who knows, and so that could show itself in the workplace or whatever. So a leader would ask his team, his or her team, how are you guys feeling? I know there's a lot going on, and this is a space where we can talk, we can communicate amongst each other, and let's talk about how you're feeling, and then more importantly, let's talk about how we can manage through that. Um, team building or whatever the
Yeah.
case may be or whatever, but don't ignore the elephant in the room. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Because it's
'Cause-
not going to go away. If anything, it would just perhaps by not acknowledging it could become exacerbated, if you will, and show itself in ways that could have been avoided. So,
this actually reminds me of something that I wish I could remember the name of this program, but many years ago, I attended an event at ICF Atlanta, their chapter in Atlanta. They have a big ICF chapter in Atlanta, and I attended with a friend of mine way back when, and I'm gonna have to call her and ask her the name of this program, because they presented they showed a movie or something, documentary that evening, and there was a man who's pretty well known for having gone into some really rough, like, high school, and he really worked with these teenagers who were like on opposite ends of, they were like they were adversaries, right, and he managed to work through and get them to come together and see eye to eye and recognize that they have more things in common. And it was beyond conflict resolution, the things that we talked about week before last. It was beyond that. It was deep. It was heavy. It was like, wow. It was like, it was so intense and so powerful. I left there feeling completely moved. I felt like, wow, if we could have more of these kinds of sessions, we could heal the world.
Hmm.
And it just makes me think that, maybe it's a worthy investment for companies to try to invest in programs such as that, where they could, even if there isn't conflict, even if there isn't just a lot of stressful world events going on, maybe it's just a good idea to regularly plan to do that, because it's just
Hmm.
good. It's just good for your people. Maybe nip it in the bud. Because I think the thing that I'm coming at is that it's been, and I know this is very anecdotal. This doesn't mean that everybody has this experience, but I know that I myself have had this experience. Colleagues have talked about the same things, that typically it doesn't get dealt with. It's there's not a proactive approach to it. It's not. I've never heard of, with the exception of when an incident happens in the workplace. If an incident happens in the workplace, then yes, they have crisis management teams that come in, and HR is usually pretty quick to mobilize and put resources in place when there's an incident that happened in the workplace. But when it comes to just responding to things at large that are just going on in the world, and paying attention to how the energy is affected in your employees, and how things might, people might be a little bit more snappy these days, or a little bit more short, or a little bit more cold, or reticent, just paying attention to those kinds of cues might send the message that, maybe we need to have a team building, like you said, or a workshop, or just invite people to come to something that they would pull together, some kind of a resource. Because I personally have never seen companies be proactive in doing those types of activities in response to things that are going on outside of the organization.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. One thing I wanted to share with you is that, eh, again, because I've retired and I'm out of the workplace, these past several months or so, I've not been able to witness up front. However, I use my wife as a lens, because she still works, and she works for a rather large Fortune 500 company here in Atlanta, and she works in a corporate environment. And they were recently all called back into the office earlier this year, and that's something that's kind of taken place, across the board, where a lot of organizations have called their employees back in to work from the office versus home. That in and of itself has been stressful, and trying to manage that. Uh, my wife has shared with me they've had a lot of, like, meetings and team building type of meetings, and trying to have fun and lessen the stress, if you will, of folks after having spent the last 2 or 3 years working from home since the pandemic. Um, you know, to manage coming into the office a little bit better.
Mm.
Um, and to your point, leaders see that, they saw the stress. People were kicking and screaming to come back into the office as a result of, it's either that or go look for another job.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, but now we have even more layered on top of that with everything that's going on in society. So to your point, that can be very visible to leaders, and I'm sure it is across the board. I'm sure it manifests itself into people acting in ways that they wouldn't normally behave, if you will, because of everything that's going on. And so you can get after that, if you will, by being proactive and pulling your team together, and having conversation around it, just acknowledging it, um, and not, as you stated, not ignoring the elephant in the room, so to
Yeah.
speak. Yeah. So Yeah, Rhonda, there is. I like the fact that you brought up that, yeah, you can't just rely on policy. Okay. Policy isn't going to fix the type of things that we're talking about, only to a certain degree. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think the best practice in today's, environment is for leaders to uh, be more aware, be cognizant of what's taking place, and looking for signs through your team members. They may exhibit, stress in different forms or whatever, and that's an indicator that, hey, you know what? Let's get a temperature read, see how the team is feeling, and in doing it as a group.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be very helpful, and not waiting for an individual to act out in a certain way where it becomes more of a performance and behavior conversation with that individual, exclusively.
No, I think that's a really good idea. So I think the key there, what you said, like I say this about everything, everything starts at the top, right? I mean, we can all be leaders. I do believe that everyone in an organization has the potential to be a leader in practice. So, regardless of your title or your role, I firmly believe
Mhm.
that. I mean, I think that everyone can take the lead, everyone can be proactive, everyone can be the embodiment of good behavior, and they can be the demonstration of a good culture that a company aspires to. I do believe that. However, tactically, um, when you really want to make sure that an initiative is pushed through an organization, it does start at the top. I mean, there's even in talking about change management work, without leadership being bought in from the top down, um, it's not going to be as effective, right?
Mhm.
And so it reminds me of building that part into what is referred to as the leader's intent. So, and it reminds me of I just responded recently to a forum online talking about psychological safety and how important that is in during organizational change. And you know what? This is kind of organizational change. I mean, companies are changing. It's the world is changing, and whether it's a
Yeah.
formal change management project, it may not be formal in that way from a project perspective, but the culture, the vibe, the internal landscape of companies are changing as a reflection of what's going on in the world. And so a good leader is going to be aware enough to be able to recognize when those are happening inside of his or her organization,
Mhm.
and will bake psychological safety and trust into their leader's intent.
Mhm.
And so, that being said, because those successful messaging and these things come from the top down, and you encourage and empower people to step into a role of being an individual leader in their own right, regardless of their role. I think that those kinds of things can help fortify the environment, the workplace environment. And yeah, maybe it's just we reinforce the concept that this is not who we are. We don't do gossip, we don't do drama. And if you're feeling that strongly about something, hey, we've got a resource for you because we care about this. So we are going to invest in programs or workshops or coaching or whatever the case may be to help navigate these challenging times that companies are faced with, because, they are having to respond to things that they never had to respond to before. Companies are expected to pick a side when it comes to political things. Companies are expected to, and not just pick a side, but they're almost forced to make public statements about the stance that they take, because if they
Mhm.
don't make a statement, then they'll get lambasted for that. It's like a company, it's becoming increasingly difficult for companies to just remain neutral. That doesn't mean that the people inside of the companies don't care about what's going on, but we've come to a place in this time where people just expect you to be all out in front and out loud, well, what do you think about what's going on over and so and such and such, and well, what do you think about the. And it's like it's very alienating and isolating. It's dangerous territory, to be honest with you, because you're not going to please everybody. The next thing you know, you're going to get canceled, and then people are going to stop buying your stuff, and they're going to blast you on social media. They're going to go on your reviews, and the next thing you know, you're losing a bunch of money, and and it's like, it's so like.
Yeah. But you know what, Rhonda? And I agree with everything that you just said, but I think there's also a caveat to how organizations navigate around, the societal noise, everything that's going on or whatever. I think most organizations then try to keep their staff focused to, the mission, the goals and objectives, the values of the organization, to state that, hey, regardless of what's going on or whatever, this is our mission, vision, and value,
Mm-hmm.
and above all else or whatever, that's what we're here for. Okay.
Right.
Um, and so let's stay focused on that. Nothing will change that. We may have to govern ourselves slightly different because of tariffs or whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, XYZ organization is in the business to do XYZ,
Right.
and we need to remain focused to that.
I think at the end of the day, that definitely is the final message, and I completely agree with that 100%. Because I also wanted to say that on the one hand, while I'm empathetic about employees, I also am being a business owner myself. I mean, I'm not a large corporation, but I certainly can understand the perspective of the other side from an employer's perspective. Like,
Hmm.
hey, you know, we didn't wake up today to get involved with these online chats. We are in the business of selling widgets or whatever the case may be, and
Hmm.
we can be empathetic and show sympathy to things that are going on, and we certainly are here to support you. But yes, to balance that out, to balance out the focus and the perspective, let's not get lost in the sauce here. The focus is on the mission, the vision. Why
Hmm.
are we here? And I want to kind of thread that in. I think that could be a good positive thing, even to keep people's minds off of the drama.
Hmm.
You know, at least while they're at work. If we can give them something different to think about, and maybe even like tie something positive to that. Maybe the answer isn't to be caught up with, trying to mitigate the drama, but maybe the answer is to put something more positive forward and say, okay, despite everything that's going on, how are we going to come out of this situation being the best that we can possibly be?
Hmm.
And find ways to respect people's. I'm not saying that you have to respect everybody's position, because I certainly don't, and I wouldn't expect everybody to do that, but I do respect their right to have their thoughts, and I respect their right to their position and their opinions.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Rhonda,
unrealistic.
yeah, no, I love how you just framed that. I think it's an opportunity for the leader to look at it more of okay, what's the solution here? And
Mm-hmm.
rally the team to have conversation. What can we do to, manage through this, not allow it to affect us? What are your thoughts, team? Um, you know, Not that they're going to come up with
Right.
anything that's going to make it go away or anything like that, but it's about how do we manage through this, how do we stay above the fray and
Mm-hmm.
not allow everything that's going on around us today to stress us out in this workplace. How can we stay as a tight unit, remain
Mm-hmm.
focused, if you will, to our strategic goals and objectives, and also have a little bit of fun. Okay.
Yeah,
um, and that's where
absolutely.
some of the team building stuff comes in.
And yeah, and I would even, and one last thing, because I know we're coming to an end here, but The other thing too is I do believe that it's possible for a company to have, very specific. I've worked for a company in the past that they had a certain ideology that they adhered to, that they just absolutely were out in front with it. And if you went to work there, you just knew, hey, this is who they are. This is what they believe in. Take it or leave it. But what was cool about them is that they didn't shove it down anybody's throat. They're a very very religious organization. But I thought, wow, what a great example of how people can coexist in an environment with different religious beliefs, different political ideologies, and everybody really did get along great because they were so focused on the mission, and the culture there was so strong that it superseded any individual's little idiosyncrasies. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, that's a great.
Yeah.
You just reminded me. A former colleague put something out on LinkedIn, a post earlier this week, and I gave her a like on it. It had to do with religion. We're in the season now of a number of Jewish, very, very important Jewish observances that are taking place starting this month. And she put out a post to suggest that, here's an opportunity to educate the workplace in terms of these observed holidays, if you will, because a lot of people, they see them, they recognize the names of them or whatever, but non-Jewish people may not understand what that is or whatever. So kind of what you just said there reminded me of that post, and opportunity, if you will, to educate folks.
Well, I know as we go to wrap up, because we've got something else going on in 10 minutes, but I think the answer, the takeaway is there are ways to be empathetic to folks, to help. There are ways to provide resources and to help people navigate difficult times. And to these last few points also, while being inclusive and being respectful of different people's backgrounds without it superseding the mission and the vision and the purpose of the company. So, and just to put a bow on top, it all starts with the leader's intent.
Yes, it does. It does.
Well, I feel glad that we had that conversation. I hope it's helpful to people out there. So once again,
I hope it gives. Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I hope it gives some folks that may have viewed this some ideas maybe to take back to their workplace.
Yeah, I hope so too. I
Absolutely.
always hope that people can take back from these podcasts and take something away from it. But anyway, as we close, I just want to say thank you, everyone for being here. Reach out to us at www.whitewolfinc.com and let us know what topics you would be interested in us covering next. Thank you so much, and we will see you next time. Bye,
Take care,
everyone.
everyone.